Thank you all for joining us for our CB seminar today. Would you please join me in Gassho? Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. I've been asked to give you a short introduction of what today's seminar is about. So we're very grateful to Bishops Reverend Marvin Harada of the Buddhist Churches of America, Reverend Eric Matsumoto of the Honpa Honganji Mission of Hawaii, and Reverend Tatsuya Aoki of the Jodo Shinshu Buddhist Temples of Canada for agreeing to and taking time from their very busy schedules to speak with us. We've asked them to discuss what they believe is the future of Jodo Shinshu Buddhism in the West. One of the reasons for holding today's discussion is a result of the Asian or immigrant Buddhist label that has been attached to our Jodo Shinshu Buddhist temples. Although we've been in the United States and Canada for well over 100 years. As Dr. Scott Mitchell, the Dean of the Institute of Buddhist Studies, said, since its arrival in North America more than a century ago, Jodo Shinshu or Shin Buddhism has been caught in a double bind. On the one hand, the community is perpetually described in terms of its Japanese heritage and thus suffers the fate familiar to many Asian Americans of being dismissed as perpetually foreign, not really American. And by framing North American Shin Buddhism as merely a type of Asian American Buddhism or a Japanese cultural institution, we perpetuate the otherness of the community. So particularly at this time when we've seen a strong uptick in Asian hate crimes here in the West, this otherness and idea of perpetually foreign is at the heart of the problem of anti-Asian racism and the hate we are currently witnessing. We'd like to ask these bishops of the North American Shin Buddhist community what they see as the future of Jodo Shinshu in the West, beyond the Japanese cultural stereotypes. Do they see a change to the foundational beliefs of Jodo Shinshu from those held by Jodo Shinshu Honganji-ha? Do they believe we will need to reject some of our cultural foundations to carry us into the future? Our CBs, Koichi Mizushima, will serve as the moderator for this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Reverend Hirono Sensei. Without further ado, I would like to begin today's session with the introduction of our first speaker. We will begin today with Reverend Tatsuya Aoki. He is from the Jodo Shinshu Buddhist Temples of Canada. So at this time, we would like to turn over the stage to him. Reverend Aoki.
Yes, thank you very much, Koichi, and Buddhist Churches of Canada, Buddhist Churches of America, Center for Buddhist Education, Bishop Marvin Harada, Bishop Eric Matsumoto, and all of you are joining today's sessions. I was asked to introduce myself while I am making presentation on behalf of Canada, and I am trying to speak, but let me just set the timer so I can track how much I'm speaking. Let me first introduce temples in Canada. So this is a map of Canada and temple locations. We currently have 12 temples. Membership is getting lower, as you can imagine. And we have 6 Kaikyoshi full-time ministers, including bishop. There are 6 temples in British Columbia, Pacific Northwest. We have 2 temples in province of Alberta, and Manitoba Buddhist Temple is in the Prairie. Toronto, Hamilton, Montreal, 3 temples in the West Coast. So the uniqueness of temples in Canada is so vast and distanced in Canada, whereas in United States, BCAs majority of Buddhist churches in the West Coast, but for us, like we are spreading horizontal. So this is quite challenging for some ministers who serve 2-3 temples by one sensei. And this dynamic of spreading the temples is, of course, based and related with Japanese Canadian internment camps before the World War II and after the World War II. I think I feel quite unique background, and the other bishops today, Marvin Harada sensei, Eric Matsumoto sensei, including myself, none of us are from the traditional Jodo Shinshu temple families. My father was high school teacher in Hokkaido, Sapporo. That's where I grew up. And although my uncle was a temple minister, I was grown up and raised as high school teachers, some. I'm not going to go to the full detail of my life, but I came to Canada when I was 19, when I was 20 years old to study English. So I came to Canada and enrolled into ESL, English as a second language. And in the school, I noticed in the area there are Jodo Shinshu Buddhist temples. There used to be 6 temples in the area. And because my background and my uncle is a temple minister, I used to go to visit his temple every Obon time or New Year's time. So I visited those 6 Jodo Shinshu temples. And Kaikyoshi minister at that time, who returned to Japan quite some time ago, he welcomed me, and while he was driving me to another temple, he said, you know, Aoki-kun, the Buddhist churches or Buddhist temples in Canada, you know, my estimate, it's going to only last for 10 years, he said. Membership is declining, and I am going to back to Japan whenever I'm ready to take over family temple. So this future of Jodo Shinshu in the West is quite vast, simple, but vast and complex factors that we are facing and experiencing today. So what I am going to talk was saying today, I want you to practice as a Buddhist, pointing a finger to the moon. I don't want you to only look at my finger. I want you to look at the moon. So please practice a Buddhist way of listening. What is Aoki trying to tell and share today? I am going to make this bold statement that I believe is, I'm pretty optimistic of the future of Zen Buddhism in the West. The functions of the temples and ministers are changing, but I think the teaching is universal, and this is needed for many, many people. One of the fundamental teaching in Buddhism is of course, teaching of impermanence, teaching of change. We talk about this all the time. At the same time, I often feel we are the ones who do not want to experience the change. Sometimes I feel even temple functions, what we sell at the temple bazaar or fundraising, just people want to continue the same way as they have been doing for many, many years. When I was assigned to Vancouver Buddhist Temple, I was told by Honganji International Department supervisor, he was saying, it was 19 years ago, he said, ministers who go to BCA, Hawaii, and Canada, you don't have to be fluent in English yet. You will learn how to speak English when you get there. So that was over 20 years ago. But today, how many temples, how many Buddhist churches where the minister speak, primary, conduct service primarily in Japanese? When I go to speak at the temples, most of the time I'm only being asked to speak or give English Dharma talk. But back in 20 years ago, many temples have dual languages, Japanese and English. And whereas in Vancouver Buddhist Temple, we still have quite large population of Japanese, Canadian, and new immigrants from Japan. Minister is asked to speak both languages. Speaking of a minister, the minister is reassigned to other temples. So to me, as me being a bishop, I sometimes feel if I minister changes the temples or churches every few years, there's no consistency. There's absolutely lacking of communications with the temples. And it actually were the same for temple members too. When temple members are not really favoring the one sensei, they ask bishop, when do I get the next sensei? So, but today, as we are being here in Canada and United States, and I see some people accessing from Europe. As I mentioned, the teaching of Buddhism is very universal. It doesn't only serve Japanese or Asian people. And in the past, if I'm speaking one of national council meeting, it was good 10 years ago. One of the big discussion amongst temple delegates from Canada at the time of annual national general meeting was some temple boys, we have to change our ethnicity or entity to be more Canadianized, Westernized, no Japanese, no Asian taste to our churches or temples. I'm not making any judgment, good or bad. I was listening and yeah, well too, I mean, we have to certainly welcome everyone, and some Japanese functions perhaps makes some people entering to our temple difficult. And I was saying, well, yeah, true, but we also have to make a balance of it. That hosting chapter, the temple, they both, we have to be Canadianized temple, Westernized temple. In the evening, when we had dinner, what we had sushi, we had teriyaki chickens, chow mein. For the entertainment, karaoke, Japanese dance, Japanese singing the poet reading, and I thought, oh, what was the discussion about this afternoon? So, I mean, to be a Buddhist, I'm not being judgmental. I hear what they are trying to express, and when the time our temples very ethnic entities, and we are still today, and that is part of all the religious traditions. But I think that teaching, especially this COVID-19 pandemic time, the teaching is so needed for people to seek the comfort of their lives. And I do constantly have different people contacting me, asking about the Buddhism. They're having difficulties with this very restricted lifestyle. In Canada, we are experiencing third wave of the COVID-19 spike. So in Toronto, they are in lockdown. In Vancouver, we are talking about closing the inter-province, interstate travels, and many restaurants are shut. I mean, all the restaurants are shut down. I received email from health officials to make sure all the religious institutes, there is absolutely no in-person service. So many people are seeking the comfort, and the Buddhism is, I think, very useful and needed for people. I usually take advantage of being on Zoom because without me going to your temple, while you coming to Vancouver, where I am today, I'm speaking from Vancouver Buddhist Temple, I am going to share and show you one feature or characteristic of this Vancouver Buddhist Temple. If you have motion sickness, you can just look at somewhere else while I am moving. I left from my office. This is we call social hall. That this is where we have teas and refreshments, or the keys, lunches together after service, after funeral service. Do you see this? Can you see this on the ceiling?
Yes.
Yes.
That is again. So welcome to the Tagari Fujis. We have this disco ball on the ceiling, and this is an example of how this Vancouver Buddhist Temple functions. When I was assigned to this temple, I was welcomed to the Hondo first, Oshoko, put my hands, and I was invited to this social hall room. I had tea with temple members welcoming me, and when I looked up, how come there is disco ball? In Japanese, we call mirror ball, disco ball, and temple members were saying, you know, when we built this temple functions as community centers. The younger people, Japanese Canadians, they come and gather this social hall, and they were dancing and they were eating Japanese comfort food. And I think at that time they are finding their future spouses. So the Friday and Saturdays, you know, the Japanese Canadians were dancing here. And I thought, wow, 6 years ago, we had some renovations, and we were changing all the ceiling tiles and painting the walls. One discussion is, you know, this disco ball, we are not using it. Shall we remove it? And I said, and many people said, no, just we have to symbolize the Buddhist temple. And this is absolutely part of this temple. So I said, does it still work? And it still does work. Let me show you. So we, after 6 years, I think it still works perfectly. It's too bad we don't gather here on Friday night or Saturday night for the social, not only not because of the COVID-19, but this symbolizes our temple, this Banka Buddhist temple functions as it was 50 years ago. All the youth, Japanese, Canadians are split. It used to be Japantown, surrounded by the Banka Buddhist temple, but it is not anymore. So our door has to open to everybody, and we welcome them and share the Buddha Dharma. So I am optimistic about how Buddhism, Jodo Shinshu, Shin Buddhism is going to grow and shared, needed in North America, Canada, Europe, Hawaii, everywhere. So I am close my talk at this right now, and I can answer some of your questions later on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Reverend Aoki Sensei. We really appreciate that. And I see a lot of great comments in the chat saying, long live the disco ball. So I think that's something that's going to resonate with all of us. Let's keep the program moving along. And I would like to ask all of you to please save your questions until the very end, and we will have a question and response session at the very end. Next up, I would like to introduce to all of you Reverend Eric Matsumoto, and he is from the Honpa Honganji Mission of Hawaii. So at this time, we would like to turn the time over to Reverend Matsumoto Sensei.
Oh, good morning, everyone. Aloha kako from Hawaii. As I was introduced, my name is Eric Matsumoto, and I was born and raised in Kona on the big island of Hawaii, where the volcano is located, maybe to give you a geographical hint of where I am from. My wife jokingly says that I was born in the territory of Hawaii, and by just a few months though. And I grew up on a coffee farm, and I graduated from a local elementary, high school, and university, the University of Hawaii at Hilo, and then went on to Ryukoku University, where I attended for 6 years. And that's where I did meet, had the good go in to meet Bishop Marvin Harada. And then in 1992, I returned to Hawaii to start my ministry here. I assumed the office of the bishop in 2011, and so for many years I've also worked with Bishop Aoki, on many endeavors. I am married. My wife Tamayo, and I'm married to Tamayo, and I have 2 children, Chika and Kaden. And as far as Hawaii Kyodan is concerned, well, we started in 1889, and though currently I guess we are about we have about half the number of temples, I guess, as BCA, and maybe 1/3 of the membership. And so maybe that gives you an idea of the Honpa Honganji Mission of Hawaii here in Hawaii. I too, as Bishop Aoki had commented, am optimistic, and I have no doubt that Jodo Shinshu has great potential. It certainly provides an alternate view, perspective, way of life, including what we refer to as salvation. I was amazed that Buddhist definitions of evil, gratitude, compassion are very different from what I normally grew up with or thought. For the past few years, I have been using the expression all-inclusive wisdom and all-embracing compassion to refer to Amida Buddha or Jodo Shinshu. The late Dr. Reverend Alfred Bloom, which many of us know, I think hit the nail on the head when he said, quote, or said the expression, the best kept secret of Buddhism, Shin Buddhism in America. As such, the challenge before us is how to share Jodo Shinshu or Shin Buddhism in the West, going beyond our traditional membership. While Jodo Shinshu, as a complete organized religion, has a history of 800 years, it was over 100 years ago here in Hawaii that the late Bishop Emyo Imamura of Honpa Mission of Hawaii had elucidated 5 points or principles for the propagation of Jodo Shinshu in a predominantly Christian American society. I'd like to just share 2 of the 5 principles that he shared. In her book, Emyo Imamura, Pioneer American Buddhist, Moriya Tomoe says that Bishop Imamura said, quote, "Follow this principle. Your faith should be based on your asking yourself the question, how will you interact with others? And what kinds of good things for oneself and others will that faith bring about now and in the future?" Imamura warns that even if the number of followers is large, if there are followers without ideals, or if it is blind faith, they bring no credit to the religion. In other words, a really substantial and important ideal that invites compassion for others as well as oneself now and in the future is the only measure used to evaluate faith. And the other point is, fifth, Shinshu must demonstrate exactly and specifically how it will contribute in a practical way to the lives of American people, end quote. According to Moriya, he, that is Bishop Imamura, proposed that from now on, we need to sell our teachings a la US propagandizing style. He was adamant in his stance that religious truth can only be transmitted through current living language. And in the case of the Hawaii mission, this translation necessitated translation into English, end quote. No doubt we have made great strides, with the Shin Buddhism translation series, publication of the collected works of Shinran and the teachings of Buddha by Bukkyo Dendo Kyokai and many of the things that BCA2 has created and some items that Hawaii has also created. But I think in many instances, we are still struggling to find more appropriate expressions, wordings, including areas of focus, which really resonate with readers, especially the average person. We also need to record the true life spiritual experiences or stories of locals in America and share them widely. It's my observation that language can be limited, for it too is influenced by or subject to the predominant perspectives of a particular culture and or society, even civilizations to which it belongs. When you come across different values and perspectives, sometimes the language of the culture or society that is being entered may not have the appropriate expressions at its disposal. As a learner of Japanese language, some examples of what I mean are like Japanese expressions like mottainai, arigatai, itadakimasu, and for us in Jodo Shinshu, shinjin, jodo, even Namo Amida Butsu are very challenging to express in simple English. There's no short, concise words. And we all know how Westerners tend to like short, concise, and to the point. But to get all the nuances and rich meaning across for some of the words I mentioned above right now, maybe I know I do many times resort to stringing several words together to convey the depth and nuances that are embedded in them. But another possibility perhaps might be to use certain words and phrases in their original to the point that they become common knowledge, part of the English vocabulary, like words like maybe sushi and Toyota that I think everybody knows. In Hawaii, let me give you an example from Hawaii. In Hawaii, the term aloha might be a perfect example to highlight. Aloha is just one word, not originally, of course, English, but embedded in it are these meanings: kindness to be expressed with tenderness, unity to be expressed with harmony, agreeable to be expressed with pleasantness, humility to be expressed with modesty, and patience to be expressed with perseverance. In the Hawaii Revised Statutes, where the above definition of aloha is found, it further shares that the aloha spirit is the coordination of mind and heart within each person. It brings each person to the self. Each person must think and emote good feelings to others. These are traits of character that express the charm, warmth, and sincerity of Hawaii's people. It was the working philosophy of the native Hawaiians and was presented as a gift to the people of Hawaii. Aloha is more than a word of greeting or farewell or salutation. Aloha means mutual regard, affection, and extends warmth in caring with no obligation in return. Aloha is the essence of relationships in which each person is important to every other person for collective existence. Aloha means to hear what is not said, to see what cannot be seen, and to know the unknowable, end quote. I think we do need an internal reset. We need to become more aware and conscious of the differences in language, culture, thinking, including views on the role of religions and issues, so we can develop and create language and approaches which will resonate with listeners being exposed to Shin Buddhism. This is especially crucial in the early stages of transmission. This was one of the hurdles that Buddhism faced as it traveled from India to China, and once again happening as Buddhism now travels from Asia to the Americas and Europe. It is important to keep in mind that while we are human beings, and as human beings, there are common traits and tendencies. However, there are also specific values, perspectives, emphasis, and behaviors which are specific and different from one culture to another. In today's world, to me, the approach of one way for all is no longer valid. We must have and use a variety of methods and approaches, as the world today, including our audience, is very, very diverse and worldwide. Another crucial matter of utmost importance, which I think we must bring out, is the nurturing aspect of our Jodo Shinshu teachings, or Amida Buddha. Of course, we all know that Buddhism does not use force, coercion, fear, and is not based on punishment and rewards, but instead emphasizes awareness and understanding, gentle encouragement and persuasion. For Jodo Shinshu, I would like to emphasize being nurtured by Amida Buddha's lights and the manifestations of Shinjin, expressing joy and responding in gratitude to Amida Buddha. As we find in the 10 benefits gained in the present life, let the joy, the gratitude manifest itself naturally. That itself will touch others. It will be motivational and inspirational, as was the case of the life of Haru Matsuda of Kona. It may be more of a quiet joy, perhaps, but nonetheless most sincere, moving, and powerful. However, given the culture and society we live in of the West, it's also important for each of us as Honganji members to verbally share and express our earnest wish for others, like family and friends, to also encounter the profound wisdom and unconditional compassion which accepts us just as we are, and for our organization to be visible and a contributing entity of the larger community. We, especially ministers, should go out into the community and be an integral part of it. In America, it is important to invite, welcome, and encourage others to come to temple, to listen to the Buddha Dharma, and at the same time, we cannot be contented to stay behind temple doors. In Asian cultures, most times the style of learning is watch and learn with an emphasis on custom and traditions. But in Western circles, more often than not, it is tell me or explain to me, then I will know, and then I may choose to follow you. In the teachings of Buddha, it does say, quote, lay followers should not only believe in the three treasures by themselves, but also they should, as far as they are able, help others to awaken an unshakable faith in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, so that they too may share in Buddha's compassion. Further, as we find in the 10 benefits, practice great compassion. To quote a quote from Shinran Shonin, it is said, what is great compassion? Those who continue solely in the Nembutsu without interruption will thereby be born without fail in the land of happiness at the end of life. If these people encourage each other and bring others to say the name, they are all called people who practice great compassion. Thus, in this way, the whole Sangha plays a very, very important role in the sharing of Jodo Shinshu. In this way, ministers and lay participate in sharing the Dharma. Ministers perhaps may share primarily through explaining the teachings through Buddhist education in various forms, but all of us, including lay people, share the Dharma by trying to live the Dharma. We are being guided and inspired by the Buddha Dharma, in short, nurtured by it. However, this aspect of Jodo Shinshu to me has not been highlighted. Besides the stark reality of being a Bombu or a spiritually foolish being, there is the compassion of Amida Buddha, which does not only embraces us, but also nurtures us and brings about a slight transformation. The ultimate transformation comes about with our birth in the Pure Land at the end of this finite life. But even in the here and now, this present life, a transformation of sorts does occur. Based on the line from the larger sutra, sentient beings who encounter this light have the three defilements swept away, and they become soft and gentle in body and mind. They dance with joy, and the good mind arises in them. When those suffering pain and travail in the three evil courses see this light, they all find respite and are freed of afflictions. After their lives have ended, they all gain emancipation. I believe Shinran Shonin then was able to say, as he says in one of his letters, quote, "There was a time for each of you when you knew nothing of Amida's vow and did not say the name of Amida Buddha, but now, guided by the compassionate means of Shakyamuni and Amida, you have begun to hear the vow. Formerly, you were drunk with the wine of ignorance and had a liking only for the three poisons of greed, anger, and folly. But since you have begun to hear the Buddha's vow, you have gradually awakened from the drunkenness of ignorance, gradually rejected the three poisons, and come to prefer at all times the medicine of Amida Buddha." End quote. Further, the late Jodo Shinshu scholar minister Reverend Tatsuya Kakehashi, in his book, Hearing the Buddha's Call, was able to say, quote, "Grounded on a sense of gratitude and shame, they, persons of Nembutsu that is, begin to live a new life, refraining from committing selfish deeds and trying to respond to the Tathagata's great compassion." Lastly, as many of us do know, our current spiritual leader, His Eminence Kojun Otani, said, quote, "Shinran Shonin is the person who shows us how we can live our lives despite our egocentric tendencies. Although we might not be able to completely eradicate our blind passions, within the embracing light of Amida Buddha, we can live each moment of our lives with true meaning, rather than simply live day in and day out as if we were just going through the motions. In the teaching's illuminating light, we can find clarity and meaning in our lives. Not separating ourselves from society, it is important that we live within the priceless interconnections that we have with one another and support each other." Needless to say, the source of anything positive or good comes about because of Amida Buddha, not my own efforts, including even responding in gratitude. Due to Amida Buddha's great light of wisdom illuminating my mind, I come to see and understand the Bombu that I am, and also that Amida Buddha's great compassion never abandons me. Be no mistake, I don't become a perfect human being. I'm still that foolish being who, quote, under karmic conditions will do anything, end quote. But as Shinran Shonin also says, quote, "We become persons who respond in gratitude to the Buddha's benevolence," end quote. To me, it means that together with a deep lament of my imperfect self, there is the aspiration to be a better person, and we become a little more understanding. Amida Buddha does not require us to change. Amida accepts us just as we are, imperfections and all. But we find ourselves being illuminated and nurtured. We become more aware of those negative qualities, like the traditional three poisons of anger, greed, and ignorance, but including others like self-centeredness, arrogance, and even fear, which cause myself and others to do things which end up hurting all of us. If one has encountered the Nembutsu Dharma, one does become more aware of one's thoughts, words, and actions, and realizes how self-centered one is. And there is, I believe, an honest attempt to try to change for the better, while still fully realizing that one remains a Bombo or spiritually foolish being. In the words of Shinran Shonin, quote, in people who have long heard the Buddha's name and said the Nembutsu, surely there are signs of rejecting the evil of this world and signs of their desire to cast off evil in themselves, end quote. One realizes that many times other people are the same in their self-centeredness, and so instead of being angry at others and demand that others change only, a sense of understanding develops with an aspiration that our life and world would be a little more peaceful and harmonious. It is, I believe, by the gentle, humble, respectful, sincere life of Nembutsu followers, reciting the Nembutsu, and the generous, joyous, reflective life of Sangha members, we can see the workings of Amida Buddha's light of purity, joy, and wisdom, and participate in sharing the Dharma with others. Again, everything is ultimately the workings of Amida Buddha, even Shinran Shonin's aspiration for peace and harmony in the world, and the wish for the Buddha Dharma to spread is inspired by the Buddha Dharma. To conclude, let me say once more, in our Western world, we need to be a little more proactive and engaged and not so passive. We should be more visible and accessible while still remaining humble, open, respectful, and expressing our deep warmth for friends and fellow practitioners. Let us give more credit to our religion, or to borrow Shinran Shonin's words, quote, I praise Amida's wisdom and virtue so that beings may hear, end quote. Finally, along with my gratitude to Buddhist Churches of America, and in particular Bishop Marvin Harada, for the invitation to be a part of this seminar, I'd like to conclude my presentation by reciting the Buddha's honored name, the Buddha's name that calls to me to entrust, and the Buddha's name which I call in gratitude. Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Reverend Matsumoto, for your presentation. At this time, I would like to introduce our final speaker for today's session, at which time we can start asking questions. So I would like to introduce to all of you Reverend Marvin Harada, who is the Bishop of the Buddhist Churches of America. So Reverend Harada.
Thank you very much, Koichi. If you could go ahead and bring up the PowerPoint. I've asked Koichi to run the PowerPoint for me. So first of all, let me thank, first of all, our CBE director, Reverend Jerry Hirano, whose idea this was to bring three of the bishops together to discuss the future of Jodo Shinshu in the West. And I'd like to thank Reverend Aoki and Reverend Matsumoto for being a part of this CBE event today. So we're going to discuss the future of Jodo Shinshu in the West. Next slide. So first I'd like to talk about, if you go back to the, you skipped one. I'd like to first reflect on the future of Buddhism in the West, the future of Buddhism in the West. Next slide. So I have absolutely no doubt that Buddhism will continue to grow in the West and that it will become a major religious tradition in the West someday. I have no doubt that this will occur. Next slide. And so the reason I can say that, I think, is just simply by looking at the history of Buddhism. Every country and culture that Buddhism has entered, in time, it became the major religion of that country and culture, as we have seen in the history of Buddhism from India to China to Korea, Japan, throughout Southeast Asia. Next slide. So someday, there will be Buddhist temples, centers, and sanghas throughout the West, perhaps even outnumbering the number of Christian churches presently today. Next slide. So this might take another 100 or 200 or more years, but it is surely to happen. I don't think I'll be around to see it,
but I would love to see what it looks like 200 years from now, maybe, the presence of Buddhism in this culture. Next slide. So the question is, what type or types of Buddhism will be the most popular, will be the most successful when that time comes, 100 or 200 years from now? Will it be Zen Buddhism? Will it be Tibetan Buddhism? Will it be Soka Gakkai? Will it be mindfulness meditation, Jodo Shinshu, or something else that has yet to arise? Next slide. So that is our challenge now, to propagate Shin Buddhism in a manner that it will grow and resonate with people in the West, and not eventually become a school of Buddhism that just dies out historically. Next slide. So our first 120 plus years of history of the BCA, we have had many challenges. We have had pioneering ministers and members who face the challenges of building our churches and temples from scratch. Next slide. They faced economic depression. They faced a world war. They were faced being sent to internment camps and racial prejudice and discrimination. Next slide. But our generation is facing now a worldwide pandemic. Our services have been canceled, fundraisers have been canceled. We haven't even been able to have, proper funerals and memorials for our loved ones who have passed away. Only recently, having very small, limited family-only services. Next slide. So how we proceed from here, it might be the most crucial period of our history of Shin Buddhism in the West. Will we adapt to the changing times and grow, or will we wither away until we are just a school of Buddhism, that was? Next slide. So first of all, I don't think we can look to the Honganji for support and guidance. They have their own problems. They project that in the next 10 years, they will lose 1/3 of their 10,000 temples. Honganji dignitaries have come and shared that information with us, with all of us ministers. They expect to lose 1/3 of their 10,000 temples. Next slide. Well, the BCA as well, when we look at our data, we lost 28% of our membership in the past 10 years. And perhaps Hawaii and Canada have similar data. Next slide. So if we lose 28% of our membership every 10 years, we will be gone in a few decades. Next slide. So what do we do? What do we do? Next slide. To be continued. Don't you hate those shows where you're getting to some kind of exciting point and then you see this to be continued? Next slide. I'm just kidding. But really, more seriously, what can we do? What can we do? Next slide. So first, I think we have to know our audience. So our audience is, first of all, our own members. But secondly, it's the general public who has yet to encounter, first of all, Buddhism, and secondly, Shin Buddhism. Next slide. So our own members, whether lifelong members or recent members, they've come to appreciate and see the value of Shin Buddhism, in their lives. So we must do what we can to retain those members in the future. Next slide. But the bigger question then is the general public. How to reach the general public, that has to be our greatest challenge. Next slide. So the website, social media, that's all really vital these days to reach new people. And I'd like to share an example of an OCBC family that started a few years ago. So this new family, non-Japanese American family, mother and father and daughter that was about 8th grade. They didn't attend any church or religion anywhere. Well, the daughter decided that they should have some kind of religion. They should have some kind of spirituality in their lives. And so she said, I'm going to start researching various churches to attend. So she researched all kinds of different religions. And then she said, okay, I've got it narrowed down to 5. There's 5 different churches I want us to visit over the next 5 weeks. So the parents said they couldn't really say no. Okay, well, let's do that then. So the first at the top of the list happened to be OCBC, Orange County Buddhist Church. So they came to the temple, they had a positive experience. And then the following Sunday, the mother asked the daughter, okay, well, where are we going to this Sunday? Are we going to the second one on the list? And the daughter said, I really like that one we went to last Sunday, that first one. Let's go back there again. And the mother said, yeah, we liked it too. Let's go back. So they went back a second time and they have stayed since. See, but it starts from the website. It starts from the website. We do the same when we want to check out a new restaurant. We go to the website first. We look at the Yelp reviews. So the website is so important to reaching the general public. Next slide. So when a new person attends, now the message has to resonate with them or they won't come back. And so that's our challenge to me as a minister, to share a meaningful message that resonates not only with our own members, but with new people, someone who's attending for the first time. Next slide. So here's a Sangha. Look at the guy sleeping in the front row. So that's our challenge as a minister, not to have that happen, not to put everybody to sleep, not to give a boring message. Next slide. So what resonates with people? Practical application of Buddhism to their everyday lives. Bishop Imamura, decades ago, was talking about that. It has to address the practical application of people's lives. So how to deal with the stress, anxiety, problems of life that we all face as human beings. So I think that's first a very important emphasis we have to work on, giving a practical application of Buddhism so that it resonates with people so they can relate to it immediately to their own everyday life. Next slide. People are seeking, how can I live a meaningful life? How can I live a fulfilled life? Shin Buddhism, I think, most definitely can help a person live a meaningful and fulfilled life. Next slide. So we have to ask, is our traditional way of presenting Jodo Shinshu resonating with people? And I have to ask, well, if it was, wouldn't we be growing instead of decreasing? So I think we have to challenge ourselves with that question of, well, maybe our approach is not resonating. Next slide. So we need to be mindful of how we present fundamental Chin concepts and how they are received by the general public. Just as an example, how we refer to Amida Buddha, for example, in our services and messages, we have to be careful not so that it won't be easily mistaken to mean a god or deity, especially for a newcomer who is attending for the first time. Oh, gee, it sounds like Amida Buddha is the same as God as what I left in the Judeo-Christian tradition. Next slide. So in the West, maybe expressions like immeasurable light, or the light of the Dharma, or the light of wisdom. Or I think Reverend Eric had a wonderful way of expressing what is Amida Buddha. Might be less misleading to the newcomer until they have a better understanding of Shin concepts and terms. Next slide. So in the same manner, how we present the Pure Land is also crucial. If we only refer to it as after we die, then how is that any different than Christian heaven to the newcomer? But if we explain the Pure Land as a metaphor for the world of truth or enlightenment, then I think this distinguishes it from sort of a Christian notion of heaven. Next slide. So Shinran Shonin himself, this is kind of paraphrased. He says, my physical body is in this world of samsara, but my heart and mind is playing in the Pure Land. So Shinran Shonin seems to indicate that he has a sense of the world of truth or enlightenment, the Pure Land, while also understanding the limitations of his own physical being and being a foolish, unenlightened being. Next slide. So also in the same manner, how we explain birth in the Pure Land can be misleading to the newcomer. And over my 34 years of ministry at Orange County, I've had this kind of dialogue, especially with our new people. It can be sort of a hang-up, an obstruction initially for them. Next slide. So it's interesting to look at the characters. Ojo, which is translated as birth, consists of these two characters. The first character, O, has a meaning of to go. Jo can mean to be born, but it also means to live, to live. So Ojo can be read to mean go and live, not birth, go and live. Go and live a fulfilled life, live a meaningful life, live a dynamic life, live a grateful life, live a life of the Nembutsu. That's what Shin Buddhism is offering us. Next slide. Meditation is an effective way to reach new people. At OCBC, for about 20 years, we've had meditation service, and it's brought many new people to our temple. Next slide. So from a doctrinal standpoint, some object to meditation in Jodo Shinshu, but meditation can be a gateway for new people to be introduced to Shin Buddhism. Next slide. So the general public has this image that meditation is Buddhism. It's one and the same thing. So if we don't have meditation, it strikes them as odd if they come to our temple. And let me give you this example of the Japanese restaurant and sushi. Let's say you go to a new Japanese restaurant and you go in and you sit down and you think, boy, I'm really dying to have some sushi tonight. It's been a long time. I really want sushi. So when the waiter or waitress comes, you say, can I have the sushi menu? I'd like to have sushi. What if the waiter or waitress says, oh, I'm sorry, we don't have sushi here. What? You don't have sushi? Isn't this a Japanese restaurant? Yes, this is a Japanese restaurant. You don't have sushi? So if in the same manner, next slide, isn't that how a newcomer would react if they came to our temple expecting to experience meditation? This is a Buddhist temple. They don't know the difference between Zen or Tibetan or anything, but it's a Buddhist temple. They expect to see or have meditation. Well, this is a Buddhist temple and you don't have meditation? That's like going to a Japanese restaurant that doesn't have sushi. It seems odd. Next slide. So meditation can be one gateway for people to enter the path to Shin Buddhism. Next slide. So we have many gateways. Cultural classes like flower arrangement or tea ceremony. People come to our temples and start with youth activities like basketball or scouting. Well, why can't meditation be one of the gateways for people to enter? Next slide. Buddhist education is crucial for our future of Jodo Shinshu in the West. Next slide. So Buddhist education programs at all of our temples is crucial. Whether the temple's small or large, we have to find a way to offer some kind of Buddhist education program. Next slide. Courses like Introduction to Buddhism and Jodo Shinshu. That should be an ongoing class for newcomers, for new people. Something related to everyday life, Buddhism and movies, Buddhism and music, book club discussions, how we relate Buddhism to our workplace, Zen Buddhism and Shin Buddhism, or Shin Buddhism and Christianity. It's just a sampling of the kinds of courses that we could offer at the local level. Next slide. We can have study classes on Shin texts like Tannisho, Shoshinge, larger sutra for people who get more deeper into the teachings. And these classes can be taught by ministers' assistants, or even by lay members who are very well studied. Next slide. In such education classes, like our Dharma messages, it has to resonate with people. Through the classes, individuals can become nurtured, as Reverend Matsumoto mentioned. They can be nurtured in the Dharma and come to cherish Shin Buddhism. Next slide. So when that occurs, then every Shin Buddhist becomes a propagator of Shin Buddhism naturally. They begin to share the impact of Shin Buddhism in their lives with others. Next slide. Okay, this is an iPad. Next slide. So the first time I saw an iPad, I was in a coffee shop like a Starbucks, like in this picture. And this guy had a new iPad. And within a few minutes, people were surrounded him. And they go, wow, is that a new iPad? Oh, and the guy was showing them how you use it and what it can do. Next slide. So I thought, Apple, they don't even need salespeople because every Apple customer is a salesperson for Apple, quite naturally. The guy was he was like a great salesperson. Oh yeah, this is the greatest thing. And it can do this and it can do that. Next slide. So that's when Shin Buddhism will really grow in the West, when each and every Shin Buddhist becomes a person who transmits the Dharma through their thoughts, through their words, and through their actions, how they live. Next slide. And that is why real propagation begins first from real seeking of the path of the Dharma. Next slide. So Professor Shigaragi, whom I studied under at Ryukoku, as well as Reverend Eric, he often taught the relationship between these two, seeking the path, which is called Gudo, and transmitting the path, which is called Dendo. So he taught us that there's no Dendo propagation without Gudo. So we have to start with seeking the path, coming to receive the teachings ourselves, then we share it with others. Next slide. So that is our challenge today for the future of Jodo Shinshu in the West. We might be facing the most challenging period of our history of Shin Buddhism. It could be our most challenging period. Next slide. So whether Jodo Shinshu will remain as one of the really living schools of Buddhism in the West 100 or 200 years from now, it may depend on what we do within our lifetimes. Next slide. But personally, I am up to that challenge, and I hope that each and every one of you are as well. And the final slide, Namandavas, Namandavas. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Reverend Harada, for your very informative presentation. I'm sure many people will be asking for those slides later, so maybe we can provide them if anybody wants them later. At this time, the formal part of the program, we finished with our presentations. If the bishops would like, I would like to give the three of you an opportunity to, even ask questions amongst yourselves, or if you had any specific discussion topics that you would like to talk about, we can definitely do that. And I'll also welcome people to ask questions in the chat at this time as well. So I'll try my best to take a look at the chat. If not, please press the hand raise button. Maybe should we begin with that discussion portion between the three bishops?
Yeah, maybe just briefly we could have a little, I don't know if Aoki Sensei or Reverend Eric has a question. Maybe I could just start it off by asking if, from what you've seen, what other Buddhist school seems to be really successful or doing really well, either in Hawaii or in Canada, or are they equally doing about the same, whether it's Zen or Tibetan or whatever? Do you have any thoughts in that regard?
Maybe I can share in the case of Hawaii. I think the traditional Buddhist denominations, generally speaking, we can say are all experiencing a decline. But there are constantly, I guess, newer and smaller groups that are continue to appear. But although most of them, I guess, are in the traditions of like Zen, maybe Tibetan, and more recently, I guess because of immigration and so forth, there's quite a large population of like Vietnamese here in Hawaii. And so, the Vietnamese Buddhist temple, although we don't have too much interaction, I hear it's quite large and things like that. And we're trying to reach out and, sort of come get to know each other better. But I think we can do much better though, and so forth. But in Hawaii, I guess one very significant, I guess it's one temple, centered on one temple perhaps, but they do have a event, I guess, on the Memorial Day weekend, which, attracts like 40,000 people, again, as you mentioned, I think the word is that it does resonate, I think, with the people. And so, it's a once a year event and so forth. To me, it's kind of, in a sense, a very stroke of genius, like combining the Memorial Day weekend with something that's traditionally associated with the Bong season, which is, soon to come, and they could sort of, I think, to me, combine the two, and also addressing, as you had mentioned too, I guess the suffering or the anxiety or something that people are trying to deal with, and their event does address that to me, and that's why I think the response is such that, and so even as of course, they do have support from their, I guess, main temple in Japan and so forth. But still, though, you can't deny that, that one particular event really does, again, attract, appeal, and resonate with many, many people.
Mm-hmm.
But generally speaking, yes, I think the traditional Japanese Buddhist denominations, are all experiencing, a decline. Mm-hmm.
Can I use this?
Oh, Aoki Sensei, did you have a comment?
Yes. Before we entering to the to accept question and we may be answering, the challenge I have today, and I am sharing this with all of you. Perhaps this involves the temple members. If you have any good ideas, please share with me. The challenge and problem I have is the system of membership.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
So if we look at only the statistical number of membership, as Bishop Harada mentioned, not only Shin Buddhism, but I think many of well-established traditional religious organizations are declining.
Mm, mm.
The problem I feel and the definition of membership is, especially for the millennials and younger generations, they ask, or people ask, what is the benefit of becoming membership? And for example, if I pay for the fitness class, well,
Mhm.
I joined the yoga class for 1 year subscriptions. It costs $300 per year. It's clear I get unlimited yoga classes. I can go to the fitness room anytime I want to. So the purpose, what I receive is clear. What is the purpose of becoming membership? The reason why I am pointing this out is, although the number of our membership is declining, however, as me being a bishop visiting all the temples in Canada, the number of people who come to service
Mhm.
or
Mhm.
who joined service virtually is actually increased,
Mm, mhm. Mhm.
which doesn't necessarily demonstrate the people who come to join the service are temple members,
Mhm.
but they do make donations each time.
Mhm.
But I think the definition of membership, sometimes I invite them, perhaps you have been coming to the temple for a year now, and here is a membership. Perhaps I would like to invite you to become a member. And I come to the service, and I find comfort with Buddhism, but I'm not quite there yet. So paying a membership to become paid member means like they are like committed Buddhist, and as being a Buddhist, we can be so casual too. And I said, oh, okay, so whenever you are ready. So this membership, as with Honganji too, if we look only at the numbers, it doesn't offer good impression. But perhaps there's maybe another way, the pledge system, some temples practice, but as being an organization, we have to pay each temple has to pay the dues to national organization based on the number of membership. So, then we have family members, my mom is a member, doesn't mean that the rest of the family is paid member too. So I just see, only if you look at the numbers, it doesn't look great. But somehow I just want to point out,
Yeah.
that doesn't mean we are declining of people who come to attend the service.
Yeah, good point. Excellent point, Aoki Sensei. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Reverend Matsumoto, Reverend Aoki, and Reverend Harada. We'll close with Gasho, please. Namo Amida Butsu.
Namo Amida Butsu.
Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Thank you.